Hi, and welcome to the Notepad Show. In today's episode, which is part of a two-part episode, we're going to be covering AOVs and LPEs and how they relate to Renderman and Houdini with a little bit of Nuke as well. So in part one, we're going to be going over AOVs. So what is an AOV? An AOV is an arbitrary output variable. It is a render pass that is included in an EXR file that allows you to control your rendered image in a compositing program after it's been rendered. It allows you to make adjustments to your image without having to re-render your rendering. And it can control all kinds of different aspects of your image. Everything from how light interacts with the surface of your object. Those are called LPE AOVs, like direct diffuse, indirect diffuse, direct specular, indirect specular. You also have data AOVs, or Renderman calls them built-in AOVs. These are AOVs that show how certain aspects of a surface are seen by the camera and can get outputted as a render pass. Things like a Z depth, a normal pass, passes that control motion blur. And they're really, really powerful. Now, there's a website I have up here. It's Renderman's website, and it has a lot of the AOVs that are included and built into Renderman. There are a lot. And I will share a link in the description to this website. So let's get started. So I'm going to bring up Houdini here. And if you go to the RAW and you go to extra image plane, you'll see several of your beauty AOV, your alpha AOV. There's some standard ones like Z depth. Although this one, there's a little bit of a bug right now where if you use denoise, you really can't use this AOV. You have to add it as a custom, and we'll go over that. I'll show that in a little bit. What that it's a real simple fix, and the same also holds true for some of the lighting AOVs. Not to get into the weeds on this, but we're going to be adding a direct specular AOV, and that you just select it. Also, notice the hints. Sometimes a hint will tell you what the actual LPE equivalent is, which is basically what an AOV is, at least when it comes to lighting. It is made up of an LPE. There are AOVs that are like data-driven AOVs, like the Z pass, or any of these passes here dealing with motion blur. And if you know how to use these passes, you're probably not needing to see this video. This is really a basic video. So we have a direct specular. We're going to add a indirect diffuse, an indirect specular. And normally I would add a diffuse right here. Although if I do that with the denoiser enabled, the denoiser has an AOV with the same name called diffuse, and it will overwrite this diffuse, which, as you can see what the LPE name is, it will get it overwritten with a very proprietary diffuse pass that's set by the denoiser checkbox. And we went over that in the past episode. So instead, I just created it here. I called it direct diffuse, gave it the same LPE name, and that's the fix. I went to custom, and it's the only one. I have a lot of AOVs here. We're going to go over most of these in the next episode, but some of these we're going to go over today. So I have a direct specular, an indirect diffuse, an indirect specular, and then a direct diffuse here. So if I hit render on this scene, and I'm going to do it in the it viewer because I have one written to disk already, but I'll just, render directly to the it viewer. So I'm going to start a render. Okay. Here it is rendering. Again, if you didn't know, you can select to write to an EXR file, a DPXR file, a PNG file, or in this case, the it viewer. So you have that option to do that in the ROP. I have a pretty fast computer, so it's done and it's written the AOVs. And there they are, 4 of them. There's the specular, the indirect diffuse, the indirect specular, and the direct diffuse. So why don't we hop into Nuke real quick. I'll simply show those AOVs and what they look like in Nuke. So let's go over to Nuke. I already have the scene set up. Now, this particular AOVI EXR I rendered ahead of time. It's got like a lot of AOVs in it for this video and the next video, and it's like sort of my go-to EXR image that I'm going to just use throughout the tutorial series. These networks are going to be used in the next video. So, but the network we're interested in is right here. So I used the shuffle node. That got me the direct diffuse. It also got me the indirect diffuse, the specular, and the indirect specular. And together, it makes my image. So I can, choose a color grade, modify it. Now it modifies the whole image. And that might be okay for some use cases. In this particular case, maybe not. Here it's not a big deal because I have no specularity on the background, so it works out fine. I'm controlling the indirect specular right here. And if I went to the specular, direct specular, even more so, right here. And the background doesn't get affected only because the material doesn't have any specularity. There might be circumstances where you're wanting to do an effect and you want to isolate, either you want to do a special effect or you're having a problem with the shader. And you're like, man, I just don't know what the roughness map is doing. Now, normally you can isolate maps in the PXR builder. You can isolate maps and stuff for debugging, but there might be circumstance where you want to just isolate a very specific thing. And that's where pxrTee comes into place. You can insert pxrTee in the middle of between 2 nodes and make this an AOV from this node going into the Uber shader. So it's called pxrTee because it's shaped like a T. It's got an input and an output and then the base. So that's why they call it that. So this pxrTee is very simple. You put it in between where you want something isolated. In this case, I'm doing it on the shader ball, and I'm also doing it on the hair, and I'm doing it on the albedo. So this is an albedo pass of just the hair or an albedo pass of just the ball. And I'll explain to you what I used it for. So the first thing you have to do is you have to label the AOV a custom name. So in this case, I just called it pxrT_hair and pxrT_ball. I could have put the word albedo, and I think I might do that just to differentiate it a little bit more. Okay. So you name it. Oh, and by the way, the pxrTee can take in an RGB input or it can take in a float. And all you have to do is go to the custom AOVs. I added this at the bottom. I added these two AOVs. Now, I changed the name, so it's called pxrTee Ball Albedo. That's the source. And then hair albedo. And then the name. This can be whatever you want it to be. If you want it to be whatever, you could. Okay? And they're enabled. And we're going to test these now. And we can test these in a look dev kind of a way because I believe I can start the IPR. So let's do that. Let's start an IPR. All right. So we have an IPR going of the ball. So I have an idea what's going on, what's being rendered. And I should see these AOVs. Yeah, and I do. I still see direct specular, direct diffuse, indirect specular. And I had turned off custom. By the way, I learned this just the other day. In real time, you can turn on and off AOVs in custom while the IPR is running. Kind of neat. Okay. So let's look at the albedo, the pxrTee albedo. So this is saying whatever's black, that's hair. So show me just the ball. And I see some issues here. I know what these issues are, by the way, with the way the star looks. It looks weird. It really is because I'm doing a polar mapping on a triangulated sphere rather than a quad sphere. And I did that for reasons related to the dynamics and the vellum solver for this object. It's easier to do it triangulated for things of a cloth vellum nature instead of quad. So, and in this case, it wasn't a huge deal. So, and then here is just the hair. So you'll notice now the sphere is not showing up, but I can see the hair. And the reason this is really cool, it just allows a little bit of look dev with, man, my hair's not looking as good as it can be. I think I want to change some of the shape of the hair coming from the root to the end. Or, you know, maybe there's an issue with how it's being UV'd with the curve view attribute. The pxrTee can be used for diagnosing problems, or it can just be used for an interesting AOV. And this AOV would be included. And I assume if you were to combine them in Nuke, it would produce some like really cool, interesting results. Now, I did albedo. You could probably do the very same with specular or roughness if you had maps plugged in. It doesn't require a map, though. You could, anything that has a RGB or a float, you'd be able to look at it and create an AOV directly in line with your shader network. And again, there's a million use cases for it. And now you know how to do it. So really powerful tools that allow you to adjust your render or your image sequence after the fact. And yeah, there's a lot to compositing. Pretty amazing stuff. As I mentioned, there's an issue with the Z depth, there's a small bug where you can't use this pass right here, this quick AOV, with denoising turned on. You'd have to turn off denoising to use that pass. And to get around that, it's a really easy thing. All you have to do is go to the custom AOV, and there is an AOV I created here called Z filtered. And you, instead of color, you want it to be on float, and just use Z as the source. So that fixes the issue. And then you'll have a Z, what's called the Z filtered pass in your Nuke or Fusion or whatever compositor you're using. And that's the workaround that I promised. So thank you for watching and have a great week.